I never thought that single evening would linger in my mind so persistently. It began as an ordinary Friday, easing into the familiar wind down of another week without any particular fanfare. The suggestion arrived via a relaxed text from Carlos, the son of my partner. He wondered if I'd like to catch a film with him, a casual outing we'd shared many times in the past. This had become part of our comfortable pattern over the last year, rooted in common hobbies and a genuine enjoyment of calm, unhurried company. At the outset, nothing stood out as unusual. Carlos was always someone whose presence I appreciated. Now 24, he brought a vibrant energy that lit up any space, tempered by a reflective side that turned our talks into something richer and more meaningful than expected. He moved with the natural assurance of someone young, yet there was an underlying depth, an observant quality that often left me slightly unsettled. At 46, I considered myself beyond the point of getting easily rattled. Still, something in Carlos had a way of making me feel strangely vulnerable. Maybe it was his focused listening. Or perhaps it was simply how he observed others, as if peeling back layers to uncover the unsaid. That evening, we met just outside the cinema shortly before the late screening. The bright marquee glowed above, bathing the small gathering of people in a gentle shimmer. He welcomed me with a warm, familiar smile. "Hope you're braced for 2 hours of questionable performances," he teased, waving the tickets. I chuckled and stepped inside with him. The movie was one of those suspense thrillers that leaned heavily on swelling orchestral swells rather than tight storytelling. Neither of us seemed deeply absorbed in the unfolding drama, but that didn't bother me. Honestly, I was there for the easy companionship, the shared quiet, and the sporadic soft comments exchanged in the dark. We picked our regular spots in the very back row, tucked into the far corner. It was more habit than anything calculated. Those seats usually stayed unoccupied, offering room to unwind without bumping elbows or dealing with noisy strangers. As the lights lowered and the trailer started, I sank into the comforting shadows, anticipating nothing beyond a forgettable picture and a peaceful night out. Yet almost right away, the atmosphere shifted in subtle ways. At first, I couldn't pinpoint it. Perhaps it was how Carlos leaned in a bit nearer while mocking an exaggerated preview, or the way his laughter stretched out just a touch longer than normal. A faint change hung in the air, delicate and gradual, reminiscent of the hushed pause right before a thunderstorm breaks. I brushed it off as my imagination running wild, but then I became aware of how frequently our arms grazed each other. It wasn't blatant or attention-grabbing, yet noticeable enough that I couldn't dismiss it. A light contact here, a fleeting brush there. My senses heightened to every point of connection, and my usually steady thoughts started to unravel. I could have shifted away. I could have said something light to break the spell, but I stayed put. Instead, I remained seated, my pulse quickening, staring at the screen while absorbing almost none of the actual story. My focus wasn't on the plot at all. It centered on the way Carlos's hand had wandered near enough to mine that the boundary between chance and purpose blurred. Then came his glance. It wasn't prolonged, just a brief look, but it carried weight. A spark of interest, perhaps, or a silent invitation. The sort of gaze that made you sense you were teetering on the brink of something unexpected. The theater stayed hushed, broken only by the projector's low whir and the occasional crinkle of snack wrappers. Between us, though, an unspoken tension built, growing louder in its silence. Neither of us uttered a word. The rest of the film blurred past in a dreamy fog. I couldn't recall the storyline or the conclusion. What stayed etched in my memory was the feeling of being observed, of proximity, of holding my breath far longer than necessary. When the house lights finally brightened and the credits scrolled, we lingered in our seats for a beat, as if reluctant to confront the subtle transformation. The walk back to the car passed in loaded quiet, filled with sideways looks and unvoiced thoughts. We avoided discussing what had, or hadn't, transpired, yet I sensed it with every step. A door had cracked open, and once awareness like that takes hold, even in the tiniest measure, going back to complete ignorance becomes nearly impossible. The following days felt strangely subdued. I handled my usual responsibilities, work, errands, evening meals at home, but my mind repeatedly drifted back to that theater moment. It wasn't solely the physical nearness. It was the heightened consciousness. The way my body had responded instinctively, the way my thoughts had wandered into territories I hadn't intended to explore. Then, about a week afterward, another message appeared from him. New release just dropped. Interested? No flourishes, no extras, just a straightforward invitation. I paused over the screen before typing back. Yes, what time? His reply came promptly, along with the title, a heavier drama this time. I recognized the premise immediately. A tale of intricate lives and tough decisions. Naturally, I thought. Of course, he chose that one. We rendezvoused again on a Thursday night. The venue felt emptier than usual, the entrance area almost deserted. He met me with the same relaxed attitude, but I caught how his eyes held mine a fraction longer during our greeting. A new layer had settled in. Understated, yet clear. We claimed the same back row corner seats. As the coming attractions rolled, that familiar electric awareness returned. Not unease, but a peculiar, vibrant attentiveness to his nearness, to the narrow gap separating us, to how my posture seemed to tilt instinctively toward him. The feature started. The screen filled with serene vistas and measured conversations. I attempted to concentrate, but my mind kept veering off course. Midway through a scene depicting two figures trapped in strained quiet on screen, I sensed it once more, his hand hovering close. He didn't seize it or force contact. He simply positioned it nearby. Near enough for the warmth to radiate. Near enough to confirm it was intentional. And I didn't withdraw. I stayed motionless, breathing measured and light, afraid any abrupt motion could fracture the fragile instant. His fingers grazed mine once, twice, and then, wordlessly, they wove between my own. Such a basic act, yet it carried the weight of revelation. We never turned to face each other. We simply remained like that, hands gently clasped while the story continued. When the film concluded and illumination returned, we stayed seated once again. And again, silence accompanied our journey home. But the world around us had undeniably transformed. The period after that second outing felt even more hushed than anticipated. Not externally, the daily bustle continued. Notifications chiming, kitchenware rattling after supper. The distant drone of the television. Internally, though, a profound realignment had occurred. I kept revisiting that instant of interlaced fingers, the subtle pressure of his palm, as if pulling it from some half-remembered reverie I wasn't meant to revisit. It lacked spectacle. No sweeping gestures, no dramatic soundtrack, just a understated, mutual recognition that had emerged without fanfare. Yet its presence was undeniable. It now occupied the space between us, a quiet companion during family dinners, corridor encounters, and glances that stretched a heartbeat too long. At home, we maintained our everyday facades skillfully. Carlos remained his typical self, affable, supportive, radiating the effortless poise that youth and self-assurance bring. But every so often, I'd notice him studying me, his expression steady and enigmatic. And instantly, warmth would flood my face, that familiar flutter stirring in my chest. I attempted to persuade myself it was all exaggeration, that I was projecting meaning where none existed, inventing cues from thin air. Yet in my core, I recognized the truth. A process had been ignited. Several days on, I returned home to discover a small folded note on the kitchen surface. The handwriting was unmistakable. Friday, 9:30. Same spot. No signature, no explanation required. My pulse raced as I tucked the paper into my pocket. By Friday, I had mentally rehearsed countless versions of how the night might unfold. Maybe we'd endure the screening and act as if nothing had evolved. Maybe light banter would follow on the ride back. Or perhaps we'd confront the shared knowledge through looks and proximity alone. I reached the theater a bit ahead of schedule. Carlos waited already, casually propped against the exterior wall, hands buried in his coat. His smile upon seeing me eased the tightness in my gut somewhat. On the surface, our interaction flowed naturally. Beneath, however, pulsed a deeper current, an invisible pull drawing us toward the undefined. "Ready for something intense tonight?" he asked, displaying the tickets. "This one's praised for its emotional depth." I smiled, appreciating the humor. "Perfect. I'm geared up for some tears." We headed in and claimed our cherished distant corner once more. The lights faded, and the picture commenced. This selection carried a distinct tone. It unfolded deliberately, focusing on individuals bound by affection, yet struggling to voice it. Every murmured exchange, every extended stare on screen resonated deeply, mirroring our own unspoken dynamic as if scripted from observation. Carlos stayed silent throughout, but his closeness registered powerfully. The slight turn of his body toward mine, the occasional press of his knee, the rhythm of his breathing, even and composed yet laced with quiet intensity. Partway through, during a poignant sequence of near-total stillness, a lone figure on a bench gazing across a shadowed body of water, summoning bravery for long-suppressed words, I felt emotion rise in my throat. Not merely from the drama, but from profound recognition of that inner struggle. Then came his hand, pressing softly against mine. Gentle, undemanding, simply present. I didn't glance over. No need. I rotated my palm upward in quiet acceptance. Our fingers intertwined effortlessly, as though practiced countless times. In that dim sanctuary, we conveyed volumes without speech. As the end credits appeared, I sensed his eyes upon me. I met them at last. No grin, but a tender determination shone through. The walk to the car passed wordlessly again, yet this silence carried purpose, granting room for reflection. At the vehicle, he held the door, then hesitated, hand on the frame. "Do you ever get the sense," he began softly, "that a film isn't merely distraction? That it's reflecting truths you've sensed but haven't faced?" His question caught me off guard, not from shock, but perfect alignment with my own reflections. "More often than I care to admit," I replied. He nodded and stepped aside so I could enter. The ride home hummed with the engine's murmur and passing lamps. No music interrupted. Upon arriving, he kept the car running briefly, eyes forward on the wheel. "I don't want any confusion for you," he said. After a pause, I faced him, words failing me amid the swirl of emotions. Yet underneath lay an undeniable honesty. "It already feels complicated," I confessed, "but not how you might assume." He turned then, his face kind yet earnest. "Then perhaps we drop the act and admit what's there." I offered no reply. None was necessary. The following hush felt full rather than strained. That night, sleep evaded me as I stared upward, replaying every exchange, look, and shared breath. The path ahead remained unclear. I had no map for what we were entering, but one certainty crystallized. Something authentic was forming. Delicate, certainly, yet sincere. In the ensuing days, our daily patterns held steady. We prepared food together, viewed shows, exchanged normal pleasantries with household members. Yet in private moments, the atmosphere transformed. It showed in the coffee cup passed with lingering fingers, in the extended eye contact when I entered a space, in the involuntary smile that rose at the sound of his approach. One late evening, I stood at the sink rinsing a cup when he entered quietly. He said nothing initially, simply leaning on the counter, observing. "Still awake?" I asked without turning. "Same as you," he answered. I placed the cup down and met his gaze. His features stayed composed, but those eyes held the familiar steady depth. "Couldn't rest," I shared. He stepped nearer. Neither could I. We paused there, the quiet dense yet comforting. Then, instinctively, he took my hand. This gesture had become our private dialect, reaching without demand. "Does it seem like we're in limbo?" he inquired softly. I paused. Waiting for what exactly? For everything to shift. The words lingered. I lacked a clear response, because the sensation echoed within me too, that edge of something feeling, anticipating an uncontrollable change. "I'm not sure," I said. "Perhaps we are." He didn't push further, only squeezed my hand lightly. "I'm not aiming to hurry," he assured. I just don't want us to miss grasping this while it's here. Those words echoed long after he retreated upstairs, after the lights dimmed and stillness reclaimed the house. It wasn't pressure or secrecy driving us. It was the search for understanding, what this bond signified, and what boundaries it respected. What complicated matters was its organic growth. The following morning, breakfast unfolded routinely. Sunlight poured across the table. I slid him the butter. He offered the coffee. No physical contact, no overt stares, yet mutual knowledge hummed beneath. Whenever I glanced up, his eyes were already there. Time began blending together, without upheaval. Mornings brought routine caffeine and background chatter. Yet underneath, the atmosphere had thickened again. The quiet between us gained substance, not tense, but saturated with the unexpressed. Carlos no longer left messages. Unnecessary now. We both sensed the rhythm of these evenings, knowing we'd converge in that familiar haven. A dimly lit room, screen glow, two souls positioned close enough for the space between to vibrate. But it no longer resembled mere hesitation. It resembled a query awaiting resolution. That particular night, we abandoned any pretense of watching. The images danced across the walls, ignored by both. He sat adjacent, body oriented toward me, fingertips tracing my sleeve's edge. "There's power in quiet," he murmured. "Breaking it risks shattering the balance." I agreed, wondering if he referenced our shared silence or the room's. "Yet sometimes," he continued, "staying silent speaks volumes." I shifted to face him. "Are we sidestepping something important?" No delay in his answer. "I think we've been safeguarding it gently." His insight resonated. I'd pondered endlessly the risks, the meaning, the implications. But clarity emerged then. We weren't pursuing recklessness or fleeting sparks. We cradled something precious, careful not to let it slip. "I reflect on it often," I confessed. "More than I should." He regarded me openly. "Same here. And I doubt it's fading." His tone held no demand, only raw candor born from weariness of concealment. I couldn't guess his desired reply, nor mine fully. But I knew this. Whatever bloomed here had taken hold in tranquility, nocturnal gatherings, and honest pauses. Such bonds endure. What comes next? I wondered aloud. Carlos reclined, hands clasped. That decision isn't mine alone. I inhaled deeply. I realized that. The film concluded unnoticed. Darkness enveloped the room, yet we stayed rooted. "You matter to me," he said eventually. I studied him closely. "You matter to me as well." Voicing it lent weight and fragility simultaneously. He nodded, gaze lowered. "I won't complicate your world further. It's already layered," I whispered. "But none of that stems from you." He lifted his eyes. "Then share what you require." A straightforward plea, yet my response defied simplicity. Time? Distance? A method to nurture this without disruption? Simultaneously, I craved recognition of its significance. Denial would dishonor it. Could we simply breathe? I suggested. Not abandon or ignore it, just cradle it softly until its shape becomes clear. He agreed with a measured nod. "We can manage that." We lingered in quiet longer, both gazing at the darkened display as if seeking guidance. It offered none, but the atmosphere felt lighter now, serene rather than burdened. As I rose, he followed. "I'm grateful we found this space," I said, indicating not only the couch but the accumulation of shared moments and trust. "Same," he echoed. At the threshold, I paused. "Sleep well, Carlos." A faint smile touched his lips. "You too." That was sufficient. I moved down the corridor, steps light, mind calmer than in recent weeks. No remorse clouded me. No turmoil remained. Instead, a gentle tranquility settled. Even absent full resolution, we had approached this connection with respect and mindfulness. And at times, that suffices.